Well, what we're talking about today is
After we get out of that rabbit hole.
right, getting ready for your garden. Right now it's February. I think we just finished the first week in February. It is time to start seed starting inside if you're going to do that. And I'm going to talk about the importance of that in just a minute. But right now is when you should be planning what is going to be in your garden. You should be getting your garden area cleaned up. Next Saturday, my grandkids are coming over and we are spending the whole day out there cleaning the whole garden area. You should be thinking about what you need to start inside and what you can start outside when it's time to go out and do all of that. You can start gardening in February. You don't have to wait until, Mother's Day to get that done. So as far as planning your garden, be thinking about, we talked a little bit about this in one of our podcasts about pantry stuff. I can't remember what episode that was, but I think it was like way back in the beginning. We talked about pantry stuff. Nicole Sauce does a great presentation about how to plan your pantry. So you can get as far in the weeds as figuring out if I have this list of meals that I ate in the month of February and I want to duplicate that for 12 months. What do I need to make that happen? Well, then you can start planning your garden. If you've got to have, 36 jars of spaghetti sauce because you want to eat that like every other week or however that figures out, well, then you got to have tomatoes and whatever other vegetables you use to make your spaghetti sauce. And then you've got to have enough of those to fill 36 jars. Yep. And then you've got to have enough tomatoes to can tomato sauce or pizza sauce or make ketchup, depending on whatever the recipe is that you want to plan for the whole year. So then you need to start looking at yields on those tomatoes. And do you plant, like sandwich type tomatoes that are really juicy as opposed to like Amish paste or San Marzano that are not as juicy? They're more meaty and they're better for sauces. There's a whole lot, when you start getting into planning this, there's a whole lot that goes into it. Don't be overwhelmed by that. I know that, I feel like I'm to the point now where I need to start looking, how many tomato plants do I need to make my tomato stuff? And Rainey and I don't even eat like sliced tomatoes. It's not something that either one of us like, but we make all kinds of tomato sauces and we eat lots of chili in the wintertime. We make our own spaghetti sauce, pizza sauce, all of those things. So how many tomato plants am I going to need to make all of that stuff that I want to last for my family for a year? And that's what I'm kind of in the process of doing right now. So planning your garden could dig into planning your pantry and, looking into that. It might, get into that world as well. But you also want to think about, there's all different kinds of ways to do things. And, just talking to people that I know that are good gardeners and learning from them, find somebody like that and let them be your mentor, because there are a million different ways to plant things. I promise you, even if you start looking at YouTube, it'll be like, plant these 5 things in February, or the best way to get the biggest yield of tomatoes. And people are talking about hugel mounds and raised beds or planting in the ground or, building compost, all of those things that play into that. Find somebody who you feel like is a good gardener, who you see, they're like always having stuff, an abundance of yield and all of that, and see if they'll mentor you and talk to you about this. Okay, so we're in February. Some of the things that you should be starting inside: tomatoes and peppers. Peppers they take a long time to germinate. You may need to have a heat mat, because that heat mat will help them to germinate faster. they're not going to germinate if it's cold in your house. They need warmth to do their thing. So, and you need to start them inside. So when it gets time to plant them in the ground in May, you've got a good, plant that's ready to go in the ground. If you plant, pepper seeds in the ground, it takes a long time for that to happen. You want to have an established plant that you're going to put in the ground. So peppers, definitely. Tomatoes. Right now, Jessica came over last weekend, I think it was, and her and I started a bunch of seeds, most of which are already germinating just a week later. But we started a bunch of the herbs that we want to have in our herb garden. And I'm really excited about that. Some herbs, like I've got rosemary out there and lavender, I think, they'll come back from last year. And I've got strawberries in our herb garden and stuff like that. They'll all come back from last year. The comfrey that I have out there, these are things that you only have to plant one time. But we started a bunch of herbs like, let me think, we got thyme and dill and oregano and parsley. There's like, I think we did 20 different plants in there. And then we also started some cucumbers. We started the peppers and the tomatoes that we want. Mostly, I think we only did like a couple plants that are, like tomatoes that you put on sandwiches, because again, Josh, my son-in-law, he's like the only one that eats them. All of the rest of the tomatoes that we did were San Marzano and Amish paste. And then the kids, so our two oldest daughters homeschool their kids, and they teach like a unit, or like you have math, English, spelling, all of those things. One of the subjects that they teach is sustainability. So they have projects that they do throughout the year. So right now the kids are learning gardening. And so they each had, I've got a bunch of trays in there, but they each had half a tray, which is like 12 plants. And they went through all of our seeds and they picked out what they wanted to start in the seed tray. And most all of their seeds are sprouting. They're going to be really excited when they see them next weekend. But then they're going to build raised beds at their place, at their house. And we're going to teach them how to make compost and all that stuff. They're going to work on that. They're going to take rabbit poo home from Mima's house and put that in their compost and all of that, which just rabbit poo doesn't need to be composted. It can be put directly onto your soil. And then they're going to plant all of their seeds that they started. And that's just going to be a whole unit lesson that they're doing. But
that's pretty cool that they're doing that and teaching them that. I mean, that stuff is a lot more educational, I think, than teaching some of the crap that they teach in public schools. So I think it's really cool that your kids are doing that and the grandkids are getting to learn a bunch of that stuff, because it's got to be fun for them when they stick some seeds in some little bitty trays and then a week later they come back and they're like, oh man. So
we were going to church this morning and Jackson came over because he lives next door to us. He's one of our grandkids. And he came over and I said, hey, you want to see what your seeds are doing? And he came in there and he was like, oh my God, look at all the stuff that's sprouting up. He was super excited. Him and Troy planted rattlesnake watermelons because they're called rattlesnake watermelons. And then they planted lacinato kale. Lacinato kale is dinosaur kale. So of course they had to plant dinosaur kale. So they were really excited to have their sprouts coming up. But okay, so those are the things that you need to be starting inside. Things, and I live in 6B, zone 6B. Jason and I both live in that zone. So you need to do this according to whatever your zone is. Especially if you have a really small window, if you live at a higher latitude, I guess, than what we do, a different zone higher up, and you have a smaller window, a growing time window, you need to be starting most of your stuff inside. Yeah. Because you want a very good established plant to plant into the ground when it comes time to do that. And you may even need to look at container gardening and that kind of thing, and having grow lights and all of that. And that could help you sustain a year-round garden. But so you definitely need to be starting your peppers and your tomatoes inside. Some of the things that you can plant in the ground right now in zone 6B, you can plant them in the ground: lettuce, spinach, Swiss chard, kale, broccoli, cabbage, kohlrabi, beets, radishes, peas, Asian greens. All of those things you can plant in the ground. Now, you may need to put one of those coverings on, over it, get some of those green poles that you stick in the ground and put, like a wind covering over it. But those things will grow like crazy because they love the cold weather. They're the ones that when you need to plant them early, because when it starts getting really warm, they will bolt and they'll just burn up. You won't have that anymore. So those are things, those are the earliest things that you can plant. And then also the things that you can plant in the fall. And one of the things that I learned, because you can do carrots too. One of the things that I learned is that it's great to plant carrots in the fall, in the late fall, and let them kind of overwinter, because when the ground gets cold, it makes the carrots sweeter. I was watching, I don't remember who it was. I was watching a gardening. He's a master gardener or whatever. It was a gardening show talking about this. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And he's out like in January pulling carrots out of the ground and talking about how delicious they are, because every time it would freeze, it would increase the sweetness of the carrots. Huh. So those are all things that you can be planting in the ground right now and actually getting, which radishes, you can harvest those like within a month. You can start getting those things. Another thing that I read today when I was trying to make a list of what we were going to talk about, because I'm always like, you plant lettuce, because I love salad stuff. And so you plant all those greens that you love to have in a salad, and then, it gets warm and those things bolt and you can't have them anymore. And you're like, I don't want to go buy fresh greens at the grocery store or whatever. I'd rather have my own. And there's ways to do it. You can plant them in a shaded area and all that kind of stuff. I just have not perfected that yet. But one of the things I read today was people talking about taking those greens from the garden and drying them and turning them into powder, and then adding them to like smoothies and stuff like that. Like, they were calling them power greens, and you have that powder, and so you get all the nutrients from those, and that's just a way for you to store that. That's not, because it's not like you can freeze lettuce and stuff like that. So you could dry them and then grind them up into a powder and use them later on. I thought that was a neat idea to do that.
Oh yeah, people do that with all kinds of stuff. I mean, they'll either dehydrate or freeze dry a lot of that stuff. And I've seen people do strawberries and everything like that, and then add it to the smoothies and do all kinds of stuff like that. I mean, heck, one thing I've done is tomato powder.
Oh, I've done that. Yeah, I've done. Yeah, and especially when you're processing tomatoes, that leftover stuff, or even if you blanch them and get the skin off, you can dry that skin up and then crush it up and then add it, to thicken, make a paste or something. I do that all the time.
And that stuff is stout. And when you freeze dry it, man, you take a little bit on your finger and it'll whop you good. It's like, boom, tomato flavor.
Yeah. But that's really just getting ready for gardening. That's really all that I have right now. Here in Kentucky, we don't plant our gardens. Usually we wait till right after Mother's Day weekend. That's usually that line that you wait for. I have planted stuff before that and regretted it every time. So now I'm just like, okay. I mean, like I gave you that list of things that you can plant in the ground right now. You can do that kind of thing. You can, there will be somewhere around April maybe is when we'll plant our potatoes, like mid-March to into April. So that's okay to do. But then anything else like the peppers and the tomatoes and all that stuff, anytime I planted them before Mother's Day weekend, there's always been a freeze and it's always killed them and it always makes me mad. So now I don't do that.
Yeah. I'm going to try potatoes again this year. I tried them a couple times and it sucked and I get just pissed off about it. And I'm like, screw it. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to eat meat and eggs and do it that way. So, but I mean, and I admit it, I'm horrible at gardening. I don't like it. I suck at it. It's not my forte. But I kind of set mine up with the food forest where I'd have some perennial stuff instead of just annual stuff all the time. I will go down there in spots that I can fill in and, do tomato plants and stuff like that. We'll put in a little bit, but I'm not just gun-ho about it. I don't eat enough vegetables for it to matter. As long as I'm growing meat, I'm fine. So yeah. I'll grow the bacon to put on the salads. It will be my deal. So, but I will plant some stuff and I will document what I plant and what I kill and how I suck at it. So, and then everybody
We're planning on having a huge tromboncino garden this year and a huge pumpkin patch because we feed those things to our pigs and our chickens, and it helps to worm them and all that kind of stuff. So that's one of those things that it's not necessarily something that we eat. I mean, I like pumpkin bread and all that kind of stuff, but it's more for our animals than it is for us.
I need some more of those tromboncino seeds.
I actually had to buy some from Mike Sparks.
Did you?
Yep. Because I've given so many of mine away. I think I may have, I don't know, maybe like 50 seeds left, but I bought some from Mike Sparks to make sure that I had enough to plant this year.
All right. That's one thing I want to plant, and I can feed it to the animals and do that. So, all right. Shelly has been the main doer on this podcast because, like I said, I suck at gardening. So